Hello, and welcome back to Vita Activa. This section of the manuscript from which I'm working is entitled Processes, which began with a quote about religion. I have never been able to practice a religion, though I've only tasted two, Christianity and Judaism. With its frequent calls to sacrifice and placing others above self, Christianity has never worked for me. I find it hard to sit still and not to counter the arguments of Christian clerics. But courtesy dictates that a church is not the forum for debating ideas, which is in itself interesting. The second religion, Judaism, is very near to my heart because some of its practices and most of its culture had me feeling at home from the moment I began introductory courses. My respect for Israel and for what the Jewish people have built and defended knows no current rivals. I tell you all this so you know my honest position within the realm of organized religion. That position is nowhere. And that's a problem, per the thought with which we began this section of processes, faith, ritual, and reverence. Quote, out of 7 billion people in the world, 6 billion think religion helps them live a long, meaningful life. And science tells us they're onto something, end quote. I suspect that what those people have that I don't is faith, ritual, and reverence at a more fundamental level than me and many other non-religious Westerners. I am also not sure that what I'm seeing in world events isn't reflective of that schism, woke thought and radical Islam versus a spiritually wobbly West. We will look at three approaches to the vital problems of faith, ritual, and reverence. The first approach is the epistemology of woke dogmatism versus classical liberal freedom. 1. A wokist judges. 2. A classical liberal considers. 1. A wokist looks first at your skin color, second at your socioeconomic past, and third at your collective adverse history based on equality of outcome. A classical liberal assesses character in light of individual histories based on principles of equality before the law. A wokist allows for no null hypotheses, i.e., if you are white and claim you are not privileged, you are a lying racist. If you are white and admit your privilege, you are a racist. There is no way for a white person to be fair-minded in woke dogma. A wokist judges based on chromatic class. This violates broadly accepted standards for the identification of facts. A classical liberal assesses individuals based on behavior and testimony, with the very real possibility that any person of any color might or might not be racist. A wokist uses any form of coercion possible to cancel or silence voices that threaten the legitimacy of their incredibly fragile metaphysics of increasingly restricted thought. A classical liberal invites someone with an opposing view to debate those ideas in an open forum so that all comers can benefit from open discussion of free thought. If you can affirm any of the premises numbered 1, read above, you are wasting your time reading any further. If you are actively wondering about or affirming those premises numbered 2, please read on. Here's the relationship between these dichotomies and faith, ritual, and reverence. If you base your faith, rituals, and reverence on a creed that intentionally excludes any privileged portion of humanity from voluntary involvement in your reverence, you have defeated the purpose of the endeavor. The endeavor of faith, ritual, and reverence at its heart is about our sameness, our aloneness, our wondering, and the magnificence of the opportunity of life. The second of our three parts regarding faith, ritual, and reverence goes back to Stephen Hawking. If a person considers herself an essentially rational creature per Aristotle's differentia, she pays attention to high levels of rationality. As such, I have always been curious about the metaphysical views of top scientists. Recently, one of Stephen Hawking's later works made its way to my desk. The question he was answering was, is there a God? Working backward from his conclusion, I will try to render the essence of his argument. Hawking's answer is that no, there could not be a God understood as the supreme first cause, because the Big Bang that created the universe also created time, i.e., time didn't exist prior to the universe, so there was no time for anything or anyone to exist, let alone time to create something so large and complex that it is nearly incomprehensible. Hawking went further, arguing that neither does the universe have a cause, as there was no time for a cause to exist. Even writing those sentences sends chills up my spine. The sense of aloneness in the universe is staggering. And yet, here we are. Not only have we created periods of peaceful, enormously cooperative productivity, but we have, just in the last century, traveled successfully into space, transplanted human hearts, and moved the measurable standard of living of most Westerners to previously never known heights. As you would expect, Hawking arrived at his position with impeccable logic. Here's my synopsis of his argument. 1. A universe requires matter or mass, energy, and space. Energy requires negative capability. The way he explained it, and the way I'm going to try and explain it, is that if you're living in a relatively flat part of the world in navigable soil, and you want to create a ski hill, you have to dig soil and pile it in an increasingly high and wide pile so that when winter comes, the snow has something to rest on that you can ski or slide down. That hole is the negative capability, which is essential to create the positive. The energy of those two is net zero. Positive and negative energy sum at zero, i.e., the energy required to dig the hole is equal to the energy required to build the hill. 4. The Big Bang, in creating wild positive energy, necessarily created an equal sum of negative energy, and that is contained in space. Think gravity, and think of what's keeping nearly an infinity of planets and galaxies in balance. 5. If you accept Einstein's E equals mc squared, you cannot refute the above. That's because mass, m, at a certain velocity, the speed of light squared, becomes kinetic, i.e. moving energy, E. That's Hawking from 2018. So we are left with no God, as there is simply no place for God in a universe with the creative explanation offered above. And here's where the parts come together. If you choose to walk away from those 5 points, your faith, rather than your reason, is dominating your epistemology. That is how you know. Emotionally, I don't like this either. Every time I write a clause like, there is no place for God, I feel a sense of ungrateful betrayal. I need God as someone, something to whom I can offer thanks. But this is how I feel, not how I think. But I'm also a psychotherapist, and some of the most convincing arguments recently made in psychology, e.g. attachment theory, go a long way to explaining such a need. We are complex, evolving creatures whose fate alone in nature trended very poorly indeed. Think of Hobbes and his solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short lives of all against all. For a man, a child, a mother to imagine they are not totally alone and totally unguided in this world of perils can be unquestionably frightening. I get it. But we also owe it to ourselves. If we choose to live Socrates' examined life, the only life worth living, to have a responsible system of epistemic accounting, i.e., what do you know? How do you know it? Hawking's argument is simple in essence and complex as hell in detail, but I would not take the opposite side in debate, as reason was his raison d'etre. Further, the existential call we each seem to possess for meaning feels completely defied by Hawking's explanation. Where is the meaning in being abandoned in some godforsaken corner of a nearly infinitely large universe? Well, that's why we need philosophy, faith, ritual, and reverence in that order to understand what our individual and community-based lives mean. And that is where I believe the West is failing itself. More succinctly, dogma must fall, philosophy, faith, ritual, and reverence for earthlings must rise. For those readers who find me too trenchant, here is the third part of the argument today. I caught this morning's minion, Kingdom of Daylight's Dauphin, dappled dawn-drawn falcon, in his riding of the rolling level, underneath him steady air, and striding high there. How he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing in his ecstasy, then off, forth on swing, as a skate's heel sweeps smooth on a bow bend. The hurl and gliding rebuffed the big wind. My heart in hiding stirred for a bird, the achiever, the mastery of the thing. Brute beauty and valor and act, O air, pride, plume here buckle, and the fire that breaks from thee then, a billion times told lovelier, more dangerous, O my chevalier. No wonder of it, sheer plod makes plow down Sicilian shine, and blue bleak embers, ah, my dear, fall, gull themselves, and gash gold vermilion. That masterpiece of poetry was dedicated by Hopkins, 1877, to one of the three iterations of the Christian God. The reverence for that bird and its magisterial motion can bring me to tears. And with Hawking's synthesized Einsteinian equation, who do we thank for such a performance? Well, that begs the appearance and purpose of beauty, a subject that I addressed in about the second video in this series. In the end, the essential fact about faith, ritual, and reverence is that we need all three to live a well-spirited life, but none of those three requires nor benefits from absolutist dogmas. On the contrary, at their best, they will necessitate a compassionate grasp of Heraclitus's river, the one into no person ever steps twice. Thank you for thinking and acting. More next week. Be well.